My name is Anne Perry. I've been a writer now for quite a long time, and I would like to share with you some of the things that I've learned over the last 15-20 years or so. What sort of book do you really enjoy reading? The ones that keep you up until 2 and 3 in the morning because you absolutely have to know what happened next? The ones that make a 15 or 16-hour plane journey feel as if it's not quite long enough? Well, I'll bet they're the ones that are about characters that you really care about, you become involved with, and you're happy to spend your time with them. And they have adventures of the heart and mind and body that involve you and you care about them. It concerns issues that you care about too, that matter to you. And it happens in places that feel real, as if you are actually there with them. That's the kind of book you're going to write. I'm going to give you 1 or 2 examples from my own books, because those are the ones I know something about. And I'm going to choose the 5 that are set in World War I, because they follow on from each other, and they're almost one story in 5 volumes. Now, the first thing you need to decide is what is going to be your theme. And by that, I mean, what is the issue, the question, the moral dilemma that interests you most, that holds you? For this, I have one overall theme, and then I have a separate one for each of the 5 stories. But the overall theme was the one which kept me absorbed and keen and eager to go back to writing again for 7 years. 2 years in the planning, and then 1 year for each of the books. And the theme was, when things are absolutely so terrible that you feel as if your world is ending, falling apart, and you don't know what to say or what to do, what can anyone say to you that is actually going to help you? What could you say to somebody else whose world was disintegrating around them? If you say, I can make it all right, it won't last long, I can help you, I can heal you, God loves you, it doesn't really help. And my main character, Joseph, is a chaplain in the trenches. These men are facing almost certain death, mutilation, loss of almost everything they care about, everybody. For a long time he feels useless. But the one thing that holds him is that he can say to them, I will not leave you. And sometimes somebody else to be there in the middle of the black night of the soul and to hold out a hand to you is enough to make the difference between your surviving it and not. That is the theme that carried me through all the books, and I still care about it. Each individual book had a separate theme as well as this, just as there's an overarching plot that starts on the 2nd or 3rd page of the very first book and finishes at the end of the last one. And then there's an individual plot for each book. The theme that you're going to write about can be anything that really exercises your emotions, your passions, your belief, your horror, that holds you, and you will put it on the pages in such a way that it will hold other people. My first theme was at the beginning of the war, is there anything that is worth fighting such a horrific battle in order to preserve? Because what are the costs? Lives beyond counting, millions of lives, the wreck of Europe. Is it worth it? What do you gain? What do you lose? I don't know the answer. Do any of us? Unfortunately, that's still a question that concerns us very much, because there's always a war somewhere. And there's no easy answer. Sometimes we rush in and we think, oh yes, this will be short, we'll get it over with. These young men thought they'd be home for Christmas. That was 4.5 years. And we know what happened. In the second one, Joseph is a chaplain in the trenches in Ypres, and we are losing, badly losing. We need 1 million men to volunteer, because we had no conscription then, to volunteer to go to the Western Front and fight. And they're there, Joseph is there with his regiment, when the first gas attack happens. Now, poisonous gas is a terrible way to go. It altered things completely. Up to that point, they'd been cold, hungry, freezing, drowning, plagued by rats, shot at by the enemy, of course. We've got big guns, heavy guns, cannons, shrapnel, rifle fire. But this was gas, poisonous gas creeping up on them. It's a terrible way to choke to death on your own body fluids. And on the scene arrives a young, eager war correspondent, and he's going to tell it like it is. He's going to tell the people at home who have no idea what their young men are going through, what it is like to choke to death with poisonous gas. He won't be able to put it in the newspapers. The government can stop him doing that. But he can put pamphlets around all the recruiting stations. And then where are our million men going to come from? We're going to be over in a matter of weeks, invaded. End of the war, we lost. He's not a very nice young man. He does quite a few things that are unpleasant. But then one day he goes over the top, over the trenches into no man's land and fights. He doesn't come back. Joseph, as so often, goes out to bring back the bodies of some of the dead and some of the badly injured but still hanging on. And he comes up with this young man, Prentice's body. But Prentice is a civilian, so he's not going to be buried in Flanders. He's going to be sent home to his family. And as Joseph is cleaning him up and making him presentable, he sees evidence that he can't argue with, he can't deny, that Prentice was murdered. He was not shot by the enemy or bayoneted. He didn't drown by accident. He was drowned deliberately, held down under the filthy water full of dead bodies and shrapnel and mud and rats and stuff, until he died. And it was not by one of the enemy, because there were no Germans anywhere near where he died, which means, unarguably, he was killed by one of our own. Now, as he's preparing him to send him home, he sees this evidence, and the other young men whose chaplain he is see it also. Everybody is going to know that this man was murdered by one of our own. Joseph is given the job of finding out who did this. It's the last thing he wants to know. But if your priest says it's okay to murder somebody if you really don't like them, what are we fighting for? That's his dilemma. And it gets worse and worse and worse the more he uncovers the truth, until he's faced with the most hideous dilemma of his life towards the end of the story. One of the dearest friends he has is Sam Weatherall, and I'd like to read you just a little bit about what that friendship means to Joseph. Sorry, Chaplain. Not bad news for him, I hope? No, Joseph said slowly. He took a breath. No news at all, at least not now. Thank you. He turned away, tripping over a rut in the uneven ground. This was only a respite. It changed nothing. But for the moment he did not have to face Sam and deliberately destroy the friendship that was his lifeline to the laughter, the warmth of human touch, the hand that reached out and grasped his in the inner darkness of this seemingly universal destruction. And this is the very end of this dilemma for Joseph. He conducted all the funerals, just brief words over white crosses in the Flanders clay, a few quiet men standing to attention, the sound of guns in the distance, the banners of the sky like lead above them, as if their shoulders held it. Sam's was the last. Joseph stood there alone after the others had gone. He did not realize anyone else had stayed until he heard Barshy G's voice. "Oh, I'm real sorry, Captain Reevely. The Major was a good man." "Yes." Joseph found it hard to speak. "He was my friend." "Did you ever find out who killed the newspaper writer?" "Yes, it's taken care of." "Knew you'd see to it," Barshy said quietly. "Debt settled then." Joseph turned to look at him. There were tears on Barshy's face, but he was smiling. He stood smartly to attention and saluted the cross that said, "Major Samuel Weatherall, killed in action, 25th of May, 1915. The middle story in 1916 concerns civilian life, the starvation of the silent war of the U-boats that just about cut off our food supplies. And it also concerns scientific invention and treason, and Joseph's terrible dilemma is when you discover that the person who's committed murder and treason is someone that you know and have known all your life, a friend of your family. How can you give evidence against them? How can you be the one to turn them in? Especially if they plead with you not to, in the name of the friendship that you've had. And yet, what are your loyalties? It's not just to yourself and to the truth. It's to all the other people who trust you to do the right thing. And one of the other threads of this particular story is the elder sister, Hannah, of the four Riebling siblings. She wants to be like her mother, to be married, to be quietly raising her own family in the village, to be a good woman. She does not want all the changes that war is bringing. The men, most of them gone. Jobs being done by women, women bank manager, women working out on the land, truck drivers, tree fellers, all sorts of things. She hates the change and it frightens her, as it probably did millions of people. But you can't hold back change. It is very difficult to face, and she has to find all her courage to keep the values she loves, not be resentful, not be hateful, and still face forward and do her part. The fourth one is 1917, when one of the most appalling battles of the whole war was fought at Passchendaele. And we lost hundreds of thousands of men injured and wounded. We've lost a lot of officers, and they're replaced by young, new, raw men who don't really understand the details of the horror. They don't understand command. They're incompetent. It's not their fault. But when you've got an incompetent officer who won't be told, what do? Will you let the loyal men that you know that may have saved your life dozens of times, shared with you their last rations, sat up with you when you were frightened and bleeding, when they're going to be sacrificed to somebody else's incompetence? Do you let that happen? Or do you somehow or another stop the officer? They plan to stop him by frightening him with a kangaroo court-martial, facing him with his own problems and difficulties and failures. And it gets out of hand. He's dead. Now they've murdered an officer. What does Joseph want to do? He does not want to find out who was guilty and what happened. And his own sister Judith is involved in getting some of the men who are guilty escape. But what can he do? Again, he's caught in another moral conflict that has no obvious solution. The last story is 1918. We're finally coming to the end of the war. We get to the point where we know it can be only weeks. And we are caught in a field hospital where everything has been frozen, nobody can come or go, because there's been a rape and murder. And Joseph begins to realize very poignantly that when you teach young men for 4.5 years that the answer to their problems is to fight the enemy with violence and kill him if possible, that you can't transfer yourself to civilian life and accept no for an answer graciously. We teach men to fight. We teach them that it's fight or survival. Kill the enemy or he'll kill you. And then we expect them to lay down arms and come home and behave like peaceful civilians. It doesn't happen. The damage is too deep, and we know that. We know that now. These, in their own way, are all universal problems, and your theme has to be applicable to your story so that your plot and your characters carry it and resonate with it, but it also needs to be something that is applicable now to all sorts of different human dilemmas, because human nature doesn't change. Fear and honor, love, betrayal, duty, they don't change. It's how you frame it and how you make us care about it and are drawn into it so we care passionately about you individual people. And then afterwards we think, yes, I've seen that here and now as well. I've faced maybe something like that myself. This story involves me. Now we come to the characters who are going to bring to life your story and your theme. You can do a lot of things with characters. You can have great fun with them. Don't forget, no matter how dark the story might be, to have a little humour. And the advantage of being the writer is that you can control the stories, because you can come up with a perfect punchline and then go back to set it up. I remember doing that once with one of the Victorian stories. Monk was a little bit dour and a little bit frightened, and Hester had been a nurse in the Crimea with Florence Nightingale. She's got rather a sharp tongue. And he says early on in their acquaintance, "I hate clever women." She says, "Oh, I love clever men." It looks as if we're both to be disappointed. But back to the war stories. They involve 4 adult siblings in the Reevely family. The eldest is Joseph, and he's in his late 30s. He is a chaplain, a priest. The second is Hannah, the eldest sister. She's married to a naval officer, and she has children. The third is Matthew. He's single, and he's in Secret Intelligence Service. The fourth is Judith, and she is still a little bit wild. She loves to drive around the countryside very fast in her father's car. She'll end up on the battlefields driving an ambulance, which is a very different thing. They all have a backstory, and that is the things that happened in their lives before we meet them, which make them into the person that they are. Now, you, the writer, need to know the backstory. I would suggest you write half a page to a page of backstory on your main 2 or 3 characters. And that should include your protagonist and your antagonist, because nobody fights to the most desperate last ditch against an enemy who's not worthy of them. Joseph's backstory is that he was married and he loved his wife deeply. He didn't know her very well because they're fairly newly married. But she died in childbirth, so he lost his wife and his child in one devastating night. Now, he still wants very much to be a good man and a good chaplain, but he does not want to become emotionally involved. He gives up having an active parish priest position because he just doesn't want to get involved in other people's pain. But he wants to be a good priest. Now, those 2 things are mutually conflicting. You cannot really help people if you refuse to be involved in their pain. So, therefore, his goal is going to be very difficult to achieve. It's a good thing to get a conflict so that you yourself are stepping in your own way, because then you have to resolve it. You can't get rid of somebody else and say, right, it's your fault. And very often we have mixed and conflicting feelings, and the internal conflict, the battle with ourselves, is one of the most interesting and the most productive, and that's where we grow. Hannah, the eldest sister, she wants to be like her mother, and she does not want to face change. And the world is completely changing. World War I, the war to end all wars, saw the end of history as it used to be. If you look at a picture of a woman before the war, with her almost ankle-length dress, very feminine, very soft, very gentle, and you think of what happened during the war and the changes, and after the war, short skirts, short hair, independence, the vote, many jobs, that's a tremendous change for 4 or 5 years. And change can be frightening. And then there's Matthew, who works in the Secret Intelligence Service. That's a hard change as well. He's half ashamed of what he does because his father loathed it, and he thought very, very highly of his father. And it's a deep conflict for him to be able to have to fight the secret war, and yet he's a young, healthy man, and other people's husbands, brothers, fathers, sons are on the Western Front fighting and dying. What's this healthy man doing here at home? Apparently doing nothing. Gets given the white feather in the streets a few times. How do you contain your temper and not say, look, I'm fighting a different war. You need me as much as you need everybody else. And then there's Judith. She's a little bit irresponsible. She learns through many, many hard lessons that if you do follow your heart and follow your conscience as opposed to what other people say you should be doing, it comes at a high price, but it also brings you a high reward. And then there is the peacemaker. He is the main antagonist. He is the man who wants to create peace at any cost. And you think, what a dreadful man. He's prepared to murder, to lie, to cheat, to steal, to betray. And then in his backstory, which you do not get all at once, backstory should be fed in little by little as they're needed, that he fought in the Boer War, which was just at the turn of the century, 1901-02, in South Africa. And that was brutal. An awful lot of civilians suffered. And we, the British, I'm afraid, set up the first civilian concentration camps. He, the peacemaker, does not want to have another war, no matter what the price, but his price would be dreadful. And as the story progresses, he is prepared to use more and more vile means to bring it to pass. And he very nearly succeeds. But with your antagonist, you need to understand why he does what he does, or she. They need to have some human qualities. Your heroes need to have the qualities that we love, but they also need to have some vulnerabilities and some weaknesses. And get them as nearly matched as you can and still keep your story whole. What are the decisions that face your heroes or heroines through which they grow? What difficulties do they have to face? What do they discover about themselves? What courage do they have to find? What mistakes do they make and get up from and go on? And there are lots of little things you're going to know about your character that are going to be fun. What do they like to eat? What do they wear? What music do they listen to? What nightmares do they have? What's beautiful to them? All these small things will be fun, and you'll add them in, and they'll give depth and texture to your story. But know your characters. Know what they do, why they do it, whom they love, whom they hate, and why. And don't forget to write out that backstory so that you know all about them. Now we come to plot, which is probably the most difficult part of your story, and in a way the most important, because if the plot is not strong, then the whole story doesn't stand up. Think of it as a skeleton. Everything's got to be connected to everything else. You can't have a limb that's unconnected to the body, or it isn't going to make sense. This is the drama that lights your theme. This is your story. Now, any plot begins with an inciting incident. That is something that makes you get up today and do whatever it is that starts off the story. Let us say you go to look for a new job today. Why today? Well, maybe yesterday you were fired from your old job, or maybe they asked you to do something which you simply felt you couldn't, or maybe you had a raging quarrel with somebody, or you need more money. Today is the day that you start out on the new course of action, begins your story. It's very important that you hook people in at the beginning. They need to know who they're rooting for, why, what you want, why it's difficult for you, where you are, when you are, and roughly what this is about. And this needs to be in the first 2 or 3 pages, because if we're confused, we're going to close the book and say, look, I don't get this. Unfortunately, people need to be caught in the first 2 or 3 pages. And I'd like to give you a short reading from the very beginning of the first of the war stories, which establishes a lot of things. This is page 3. We have already established that we're at a cricket match in Fenners Field in Cambridge, and we know that it's quite a long time ago. It's a golden summer afternoon. The girls are wearing white muslin dresses down to their ankles, big hats. And our hero, Joseph, has been watching, and his brother Matthew comes striding across the grass towards him. He was steadying himself with difficulty, and he gulped before he found his voice. He cleared his throat. There was a kind of desperation in his eyes. It's Mother and Father, he said hoarsely. There's been an accident. Joseph refused to grasp what he had said. An accident? Matthew nodded, struggling to govern his ragged breathing. In the car. They're both dead. For a moment the words had no meaning for Joseph. Instantly his father's face came to his mind, lean and gentle, blue eyes steady. It was impossible that he could be dead. The car went off the road, Matthew was saying. just before the Hoxton Mill Bridge. His voice sounded strange and far away. Behind Joseph they were still playing cricket. He heard the sound of the ball and another burst of applause. "Joseph?" Matthew's hand was on his arm and his grip tight. "I'm sorry," he said quietly. "I wish I hadn't had to tell you like this. It's all right." Joseph cut across him. He changed his mind, still trying to grasp the reality. The Hoxton Road, where were they going? Matthew's fingers tightened on his arm. They began to walk slowly, close together, over the sun-baked grass. There was a curious dizziness in the heat. Sweat trickled down Joseph's skin, and inside he was cold. Matthew stopped again. "Father telephoned me late yesterday evening," he replied huskily, as if the words were almost unbearable for him. "He said someone had given him a document outlining a plot so hideous it would change the world we know, ruin England and everything we stand for, forever. He said it reaches as high as the royal family." Towards the end of this story, just a little example of using scenery to give foreboding, symbolism, just a very short piece. 10 minutes later, they were on the road again. It hardly seemed different from any summer weekend. The lanes were thick with leaf, the harvest fields ripe, here and there stippled with the burning scarlet of poppies. The swallows were gathering. And the very end of this story, we now, of course, know what happened. This is the family sitting at home on an evening very early in August. Germany has declared war on France and is massed to invade Belgium. When it happens, we will send Germany an ultimatum, which of course they will refuse. By midnight tomorrow, we shall be at war. Sir Edward Grey said, "The lamps are going out all over Europe. We shall not see them lit again in our lifetime." "Perhaps not." Joseph took a deep breath. "We shall have to carry our own light, the best we can." Judith buried her head in his shoulder, and Matthew reached out around her to take Joseph's hand and grip it. That is an example of an inciting incident and how it follows through, and you get the climax to the story at the end. Beginnings and endings are pretty important. All the way through there will be conflicts. That sounds a little bit like people always battling, and that's not what I mean. There can be different sorts of conflicts. Perhaps the most powerful is the internal conflict within any given person. When you have decisions to make, you must make them. Neither choice is good, but you must have one of them. Or both choices are good, and you can only have one of them. If you take one, you sacrifice the other. These are the great dilemmas that afflict most of us at some time or another. The matter of making a choice and then living with it, owning it, having the courage to say, yes, I did this and it was right or it was wrong. And if it's a mistake, changing it if you can. Isn't it the instinct of all to say, well, it wasn't my fault or I couldn't help it or I really was right anyway? It takes a big person to say, no, I was wrong. Or to have made a mistake and to own up to it. And when you flatten your face on the ground, to find the courage to get up and start again. This is the measure of your character, of the courage and the honour that they have. And then, of course, there are all sorts of personal conflicts between two people or between several people. Almost every family has them at some time or another. Friends have them, pupils and teachers have them, comrades in arms have them. And it's what the conflict is about and what you're prepared to do to win your side of it. If you can win and lose with equal grace, it takes a big person to do that. And you might have a whole story in which a person gradually learns how to conduct themselves on this level without ever sinking below what they want to be. We all of us do that sometimes. And then, of course, there are conflicts between groups, whether it's gangs or teams or business rivals or whatever it is. And then there are world conflicts, such as the war that I'm referring to. And of course, if you're writing science fiction, you can have intergalactic conflicts if you wish, or conflicts between different species. It's not the size of the conflict that matters. It's what people will do, how they change, what they discover within themselves when they're fighting for survival. And sometimes you have some terrible discoveries to make, such as that the side you're fighting for is not really the one you believe in, or that they have done things you can't own and can't be part of. But perhaps you do have to take the blame. And if you lose, how do you lose with grace and without hatred? Hatred changes you. It changes you far more than it changes the person you hate. There are so many things that come out of conflict. You've got 100 stories right there. There are decisions to make and how you react to them. What makes you make the decision? Sometimes we make them in temper, in anger, or because we simply can't bear to lose. In all stories, there are turning points. And this is what makes a story interesting and dramatic. When you're going in one direction and something happens to block your way, and you have to think, now, just a minute, I can't go forward. What am I going to do? Am I going to lash out at somebody? I'm going to give up. I'm going to find a way around it. And whose feet am I going to tread on, or face am I going to tread on, to find the way towards the victory that I want? I'd like to read you a small piece about a fairly big turning point in one of these stories. No one moved. Not a duckboard tilted or a foot squelched. Then he heard it, not a fusillade of fire, but gasping, a cry strangled in the throat. Gagging. Sam swiveled round, his face ashen. God Almighty, he said, his voice choking. It's gas. Run. Joseph froze. He didn't understand. How could any soldier, let alone Sam, give the order to run? Then Sam's shoulder hit him hard on the chest and almost knocked him off his feet. He bent to a crouch, more by instinct than thought. Get up! Sam shouted at him. There were other noises now, yells of rage, terror, half-words cut off in the middle, awful sounds of men retching and choking, and beyond them the rising barrage of gunfire. Get up! Sam shouted again. The gas sinks! It's on the ground. That was the first gas attack at Ypres, and that changed the face of the war. It changed the way that men died. Of course, there are all kinds of turning points in love stories, in stories of loyalty, of discovery, of quest, all sorts of things. It's when something happens that changes the direction of your story, and they're very important. Keep making turning points. Block your path to progress so that the hero has to think of something different. Make the antagonist do something that changes the course of action. And way along your story, the darkness is going to increase. It's going to get more and more desperate. You're going to feel the panic rise as we have to do something. The situation gets worse. I have one of my agents in New York keep telling me, get the situation as bad as you can and then think of something to make it worse. Go for broke. Then, of course, you get the crisis, and then you get the climax when we face the last battle, and then the resolution. When you achieve your goal, or you realize that it's not what you wanted and there's something different, but you leave people feeling, the whole arc of growth, the change that's happened within the people, that's been accomplished. We've learned something. We've made a journey. You have to be different at the end from the way you were at the beginning. You've learned something, you've achieved something, you've understood something you didn't before. You've maybe conquered a flaw in your own character. You're bigger. You've discovered something. You've arrived. Of course, there will be historical turning points that may also affect your story. At the very end of the first book, there was the declaration of war. In the second one, there was not only the first gas attack, but there was a sinking of the Lusitania, which brought America so much closer to coming into the war, and it was an appalling attack on hundreds of civilians. And of course the ship went down, everybody was lost. Then there was the fiasco at Gallipoli, which was a nightmare. Everything that could go wrong did, and it was our incompetence that caused it. And that, I think, was a turning point in public feeling. One of the other turning points was the Battle of Jutland in 1916. It was the only surface battle, naval surface battle of the war. Other than that, it was all U-boats. And it was indecisive. But it was an extraordinary event, and I couldn't resist including it in my plot. You may find that there are other things like that yourself, that you see and you want to be there. You need to make people understand, and I would suggest that you use records of people who were there, because you need to convey not what history says happened, but what the people who are present feel happened. And that is true for any event that you didn't personally witness, because we can all be clever afterwards, but that's not the feeling of how it happened. That's only what the historians say. Do the settings that you have, serve your theme, broaden your characters, tighten your plot. And by the end of the story, have you made clear your theme and made the reader feel, my goodness, that is a question to which I don't know the answer either, and it matters. Are you weaving it in fairly seamlessly? Because you must make people believe that the plot is so real and so tight that everything that happened needed to happen, given whatever happened before. The difference between just recounting event after event and a plot is that the plot, this happened, therefore this happened, so we had to do that, which reaction was that. And there's a sort of inevitability about it, so that it carries you along. And don't forget, at the ending, we need to be resolved. Some people are happy to put an epilogue in to explain things. Personally, I think you should do your explaining in the second to last chapter, and the last chapter is the action, and leaves you feeling breathless and satisfied and sorry that the book's ended, but it was right. You believe it, and you care. Dialogue is fun. If you ever listen to people's conversations, if you love talking yourself, it'll come easily to you. But just remember that we don't write dialogue as people really speak if you don't need the ums and the ers and the ahs or the repetitions. So you might write it quite naturally and then edit it a little bit to scrunch it up. There are two main parts of dialogue. There is the text, which is what people are actually saying, and they could be talking about the weather. Doesn't matter. And there's a subtext, which is what they're meaning. And very often that is much more interesting than what is actually said on the outside. You get the emotional nuances through, the choice of vocabulary, what people are saying and what you know they're not saying. And that is the subtext, and there needs to be both in all your dialogue. I suggest that if you have people who come from a particular region, that you have a dialect or an accent or unusual words, keep it to a minimum and suggest it rather than using it literally all the time, because you don't want to lose your reader. You're writing for everybody, not just people who come from that region and understand those words. A suggestion will let you know that they're different. And people, one person will use a different vocabulary from another. I can remember writing what I thought was a terrific piece of dialogue, and my agent said, "Yeah, it's fine. Everybody sounds like Anne Perry." I thought, oh dear. Yes, well, they should sound like themselves. You can get a lot through with dialogue, a lot about personality, what people say and what they don't say, the expressions on their faces, the tone in their voices, their body language. Don't forget all of these things. Now, I'd like to read you a little bit of dialogue which shows very different sorts of people, and it shows the humour and the subtext underneath the text. At least I hope it does. This is when Joseph is on the beaches at Gallipoli, which was the most appalling patch of the war. And literally from the air, apparently, you could see the red of human blood in the seawater. Joseph and his guide reached a group of soldiers sitting on the grass, eating rough bread and tinned bully beef. A Dixie can of tea hung over a smouldering fire. One of them looked up. "What you got there, Blue? Reinforcements from Blighty?" There was a guffaw of laughter again from a half-dozen men. "Only if you're feeling like the last rites," Blue replied. sitting cross-legged in a spare patch without too many small stones. "Sit down, mate," he invited Joseph. "Bleeding hell," one of the men said, his eyes widening as he realized Joseph was a chaplain. "Are things that bad?" Another man crossed himself elaborately. "Here we are, stuck on the edge of being wiped out, and what do the pommies send us? One bloody preacher. You going to bury the lot of us then? Or are you the real thing?" Joseph blushed. "The real thing? Part the waters and we can walk to the other side." There was more laughter. "No use," Blue said cheerfully. "We don't want to be on the other side, Dumbo." "Speak for yourself, mate. I'd love to be on the other side." He turned to Joseph. "What are you here for, Rev? Maybe you can turn the stones to bread?" "How about turning the water to wine?" another suggested. "Actually, I'm no use at all," Joseph said candidly. "I need you to help me." "Too right you do," three of them replied in chorus. "What's your problem, sport?" another asked, squinting a little at him. "Apart from that you're here, of course. We all got that one." He grinned, showing a gap tooth at the front. Exposition is the explaining that you need to do to the reader, that you can't get into dialogue or into action. There are lots of things we need to know, details about where we are and when and what the situation is. Keep it as brief as possible. I don't know if you're like me, but if I see one page that's one entire paragraph long, I want to skip to the bottom of it and get on. Break it up. Don't tell us what we don't need to know now. Be sure that you tell us what we do have to know, but only as much as that, and let's have it drip feed. I think that's the key term. Drip feed it to us little by little as we have to know it. And if we can learn it in some other show, don't tell, then that would be better still. We don't want blocks of stuff that is just raw information and stops the action. This is drama. This is story. Let's keep it moving. You can set your story anywhere that works for you and works for the theme. You can make it present day right where you live or anywhere else in the world you like. And if there's nowhere you like, you can invent somewhere, and you can put it in any period of time that you want, from Stone Age into the future. And you can set it, if you want to, on another planet, another galaxy, as long as you make it seem real to us who are reading you. We need to feel that we are there, that we not only see it and hear it, and as children of the film age, we tend to concentrate on those senses, we also need to smell it, taste it, feel it. It's very easy to see ice and to hear it cracking. Remember, you'll also feel cold, and coldness has a smell and a tingle in the nose. We need to feel as if we are there, and there are two ways I find of doing that. One is to research it so that you find what is unique about that place, and it may be a place you know quite well, or it may be somewhere in your imagination, or a place that was real and you need to find out what it was like. And then there are the other things which are pretty well universal. I mean, if you've got a stone in your shoe, it doesn't matter whether you're walking the Great Wall of China in 16-something, or the Inca Road in Peru in 13-something, or New York tomorrow. It's still going to feel much the same. It's going to hurt your foot, and we all know what that feels like. We've probably all had blisters. There are certain things that are common to everywhere, and it's amazing how useful they can be if you feel exhausted, or too hot, or too cold, or hungry, or a bit queasy. Those things are pretty well universal. Make your people feel them, wherever they are, and then put in also what might be unique to that place, and you'll have people believing that they are there with you. That's important. Pick the setting you want that tells your story, that supports your theme, and it may be a new and different way that nobody else has thought of, to make people think of something, a conflict, and feel with it. Let them be there. Take them on the trip of their life. You can make some wonderful scenes that are going to stay in people's memories. It doesn't necessarily have to be a long one. Sometimes less is more. I want to read you now a very brief scene from fairly early on in the first war book, when Joseph is thinking of his father. Memories flooded back of pottering quietly in the garden, John telling long rambling jokes, the smell of lily of the valley, Hannah brushing Alice's hair, Sunday dinner. He leaned against the mantel and wept, letting go of the self-control at last, and freeing the grief to wash over him and take hold. Don't be afraid to ask the really difficult questions. This is your shot at making a mark, making people think, making them face the unthinkable. What then? Retreat to the hills of Wales, Scotland? Fight in the forests and fens until there was no one left? Or submit? Sue for peace and some kind of survival? On what terms? Would that be to betray the dead who had already paid so high a price, only to have it thrown away now? Or the living, who had to make the best of what was left? At what point was it no longer worth fighting? You can vary your scenes so that you put them against all manner of different kinds of backgrounds. For example, early in this one, we have the beautiful old quads of Cambridge, of the college. We have punting on the river. Could there be a more idyllic scene than young people, girls in their floaty white dresses and big hats, and young men balancing on the stern of the punt as they go laughing down the river with picnics? That's a world that's coming to an end. Or village scenes during the war, when you get the women coming to look at the casualty notices posted, dreading to see the names of those they love. Perhaps it could be most of their family. There were women who lost their fathers, their uncles, their husbands, their brothers, and their sons. You see their names, the names of the fallen, on the village war memorials, and you realize that there could be a dozen people from one family. How do you deal with that? Or the beautiful and terrible scenes, the drama of glory of a wonderful sunset over the trenches filled with mud and bodies. The glory of the sky, the scarlet in the water. It's beautiful and it's horrible. You've got rain, rats, hunger and fear. Or the Battle of Jutland, the only surface naval battle. Great ships with 1,000 men plunging beneath the water, never to come back up again. And you've got field hospitals where they've got hardly any medicine, just doing everything they can to save those that can possibly be saved. And of course you can't do World War I without having Red Baron and the war in the air. And I've got a piece I'd like to read you the morning after the first day of the Battle of Passchendaele. Got them out, they did. Didn't leave a single live one behind. Joseph felt a wave of gratitude that Judith was all right, still alive. It was so powerful he smiled fatuously in spite of his effort not to. He forced himself not to think about her most of the time. Everyone had friends, brothers, someone to lose. It would cripple one to think of it too much. "I'm afraid Major Penhaligon's dead, sir," Varshy went on. "Pretty well half the brigade, dead or wounded. The Canadians and the Aussies got it hard too. Word is we could have lost around 50,000 men." His voice choked, words useless. "This summer?" Joseph said. It was worse than he'd thought. "No, sir," Varshy replied hoarsely, the tears running down his cheeks. "Yesterday, sir." And talking about telling it as it is and asking the hard questions, sometimes somebody else can sum up your hero's dilemma better than they can themselves, briefly and telling them absolutely in their face so they can't escape it. Mason smiled. The expression softened his face, changing him. "But we're not the same, Reevely. I'm a war correspondent. I can observe, tell stories, ask questions. You're a chaplain, supposedly a man of God. People think you know the difference between right and wrong. They look to you to tell them, especially now when the world is falling apart. If you won't stand, Reverend, who will? There was mockery in his face, but a wry, self-conscious sort of hope as well. He wanted Joseph to have the certainty and the faith that he did not. Research is very important. You may be writing about a situation and a place and skills that you know everything about already. Most of us have at least something that is new, and even if you do know, perhaps the next book or the one after, you'll move to something that you don't know. Research is important. We want people to feel that we've got it right, that we know what we're talking about, but most of it is to avoid errors. A bit like an iceberg, you'll see the top seventh or something like that. The rest is in order to keep it upright and from making silly mistakes, particularly having people do things that they couldn't have done at the time or the place, inventing skills that they couldn't have, having things that are wrongly placed in history, using words that are anachronistic, having somebody in the 17th century say, okay. There are lots and lots and lots of things that you just need to avoid the mistakes. And it's very easy to put in a few very telling details that let somebody know where and when we are and have the feeling of being different. Two things that I have found extraordinarily useful. One is domestic detail. If you're sweeping the floor with a besom brush rather than hoovering it, and if when you iron your clothes, you have to use a flat iron and you change it on the stove to keep the warm one just about right, then you know that you're set back quite a bit. And you can get domestic details of quite a lot of different times and places quite easily. And then you can have two women discussing something whilst they're doing the jobs, and that sets you very much in the time and place. And another great deal less comfortable one is medicine. Medicine's changed enormously over a couple of thousand years, and it's not been a steady progress. But if you realise how lucky we are to live when we've got anaesthetics and antiseptic wash, not to mention drugs of sorts that deal with all sorts of things. But there were always doctors going back 1,000 years or more, and there was medicine. The Egyptians, ancient Egyptians, knew how to trepan the brain, to slice around and take the top of the skull off and get inside and remove something that shouldn't have been there. And then we lost it again. In the 1200s, we knew how to have anaesthetics, and then we lost it again. Got a very interesting Byzantine recipe for the 1200s for that. It includes Theban opium. It's the best. But it really takes you very sharply and vividly back to the reality and the pain and the challenges and the courage of certain times in the past. But this that you're writing is a story. It's not a history. So don't tell us everything we need to know about it, just what we need for this story. Everything you ever wanted to know about planting turnips and everything you didn't want to know as well. Cut out what you don't need. I've spent weeks doing wonderful research and had the editor take it all out, clogging up the story. I thought, I'd spent ages getting that. She's right, it clogs up the story. If you want to read a history about a particular period of time and place, you'll read one. This is the story. We need to feel as if we are there, but most of all we care about the people. What do they want? What are they feeling? Who do they love? What are they terrified of? What do they want? But there are various different things that it's very easy to get wrong if you don't research it. Clothes, architecture, customs, science, travel, food, transport, communication. But these are the physical things. Remember to get the emotional things right as well. Don't make people have expectation of things that people didn't at their time and place. Just as an example, in the time of Charles I of England, 1630s, 40s, the idea of a woman expecting to get a vote, we've got a king, he tells you what to do, the absolute monarch, and this is part of why we had the Civil War. But the idea of a woman having a say in things was just ridiculous. You'd have much chance to ask your dog But if you blasphemed, you could wind up in very serious legal trouble. Now I'm afraid I've heard 5-year-olds blaspheme all over the place and nobody raises an eyebrow. Keep your expectations, your beliefs, and what you expect to be able to achieve what you even dream of, right and appropriate to the people that you're writing about, whoever they are. Also, there are very specific things that you might need to get. For example, in the war stories, I needed to get my uniforms right. I didn't have the tin hats to begin with. Weapons. Exactly how did the weapons fire and how quickly could you reload them and how accurate were they? And what did the ordinary soldier carry? And back to medicine again, of course, injuries and illnesses. Your body will react exactly the same way at any period of time to an injury. But there'll be different things that we do about it, and the body will react differently to the medicine of the past as well. Get your access to food and water right. You don't think when you're drowning in the trenches, filled with mud and rats and so forth, that you might be short of water to drink. But you've got to drink clean water. You drink that and you'll be dead. How often did the letters from home come? And did the people write about what it was really like? No, they didn't. They were very, very brave. They suffered more or less in silence. They did not want their families to know. What were some of the things that were particularly difficult apart from food, water and being shot? Boredom. Endless boredom. What do you do day after day after day? You might have short bursts of battle. How much sleep did you get? All these things you will get if you want for World War I or probably II or anything since then. Read the letters from home. Read the letters that the soldiers sent. Then you'll know what people said and what they really felt. Any battle that you're going to describe or any major event, if you can find an eyewitness account from somebody who was there, that will tell you not what the historians say happened, but what the people who were present think happened, how it felt to them, because you're wanting to feel that you are there. Now we're on to rewrite. This is in a way the most satisfying part of it all. This is when you go back and you fix everything that wasn't quite perfect the first time round. And you'll be pretty shocked at a number of typos that I make at any rate, and possibly you will too. But the opportunities that you missed and you now see what you can do. I have in a 500-page manuscript a habit of thinking on page 498, wouldn't it be a good idea if? Okay, go back to the beginning and weave it in. You can do this with a writer. You're God, you can do anything you want. So you go through and you look for the things that were not quite as good as they could have been. Some of the things to watch for, apart from typos, continuity details. You might accidentally have got 31 days in February, or you might have had an 8-day week, or gone shopping every day, including Sundays. And in most times and places there is a Sabbath when everything's shut. You can have somebody going into the house to visit somebody and taking off their coat because it's raining outside and they've had to wear it, and they have a wonderful conversation, they go out leaving their coat behind. I've done that a number of times. I don't mean for real. I mean in story. Very often you say something, you know what you mean, but when you read it back it's a little ambiguous. It could mean that or it could mean something else. And don't ever make the reader go back and reread something because they don't know what it meant. Be clear. That jerks them out of the story and you've lost your tension and your drama. You might find that altogether you can make it sharper, that you've said things maybe 2 or 3 times, or with more words than you need. Less is very often more. Or using simpler language as well. I can remember a young man closing the prayer meeting with, as we take our departure for our various destinations. I thought, fella, you sound like a railway tannoy. As we go home. Use the simple, the powerful words. That's the way we think when we're under great emotion. The cleaner you can make it, the more powerful it is, the more it will resonate with the people who are reading it. Make every scene serve one purpose at least, because if it doesn't serve any purpose, then it needs to come out. 2 purposes will be even better. Sometimes you can advance the story and give backstory information and sharpen character, all in the one scene. Sometimes you can do 2 things in the story, or develop a relationship. make every scene work the very best it can for you. You can condense character if necessary. You might find you've got 8 or 10 characters and maybe 2 or 3 you don't really need. And maybe one minor character could do something that a major character does. And incidentally, if you're going to describe people at all, do it the first time we meet them, because if they are sharp and real, we'll have a picture of them in our mind. And if we then come across your description, it is different, it kind of throws your involvement in the drama. And I would suggest that you're quite careful about picking the right names for people. I've had characters that didn't come to life until I changed the names and gave them a different one. And I remember a long time ago reading about half a book in which they had a June, a Jane, a Jean, and a Joan. And I was so fed up with checking up on which person they actually meant that I lost the thread of the story. Give your people different names, maybe some long, some short, starting with different letters. It just helps to keep the reader focused and concentrating with you. They should never have to go back and wonder what you meant. As well as repetitions, and I'm afraid that sometimes I find a word that becomes a favourite and it's what we call a verbal tick. I keep using it. I wrote a fantasy, and when I went through it, I don't know how many times I'd used the word shimmering. I had to find about 15 parallels I could possibly use to something else. You know, it's a good memorable word, twice as much as you can use it in one book. And you may very well have thought you said something, but somewhere along the line it slipped through and you didn't say it. I'm quite good at having a riveting conversation and never letting you know where we are. Or walking along the street and crossing 12 intersections, there's no traffic, we're the only people in the world. Just little bits where you can add and make it sharper, make it more vivid, and maybe use scenery to echo what you're saying, or to contrast with it. Just make it better and better and better. Talking about contrasts and echoes and reflections of one thing in another, one echo which I read you was that Joseph and Matthew's parents were together in a car when they were murdered. And it was on the same day that the Archduke and Duchess of Austria were murdered in a car. You can use all sorts of little things like that. I've got a story I've got planned where 2 women who are totally different, it's set in the 1930s, and I love the fashion of the 1930s. They both like the same style of dress, although they're completely different sorts of people. And there's a hero and a villain, a really, really good man and a very evil one, who both like their crisp, fresh bread dipped in olive oil with herbs. You can have a lot of fun with doing these things. I mean, don't play too far, but use things that are symbolic, that set the mood. Describe a landscape briefly that really reflects the flavour of the story and is maybe even part of it. Put more passion, more colour, more power into it, refine it. You can go over and over. I mean, there are a finite number of times you can do it or you'll never get it off. But keep your language simple. Don't put in too many adjectives. It doesn't strengthen it. Strangely enough, it weakens it. Maybe we just get bogged down and lose the thread of what's happening. Put your passion into it, what you believe. Don't be afraid to put yourself on the page. That's what you're doing. If a person can read your book and feel at the end that they don't know you, either they weren't paying attention or you weren't. This is a wonderful thing to do. You are immortalizing your beliefs. You are passing them on to somebody else. I want to read you now, because endings and beginnings matter very much, the end of the arc of Joseph's experience. All the mysteries have been tied up. The love stories have been tied up. We know who did what to whom and why. We just remain Joseph's journey from being a man who wanted to be a good priest but did not want to be involved, to who he is. On the morning of the 11th of November, Joseph crouched in a new, hastily constructed dugout. It was no more than a foxhole. He stared across the stretch of no man's land, far to the east of the old one at Ypres. The guns were still firing. Heavy artillery shells gouged up the earth. Snipers picked off the odd, careless soldier who raised his head too high. Morrell was 20 yards along to the right, Tiddlywop behind him. The sun caught Snowy Nun's fair hair. "Knew you'd come back, Chaplain," Barshie G said beside Joseph. Joseph turned to look at him. Gunfire roared again, obliterating Barshie's words. Joseph shook his head to indicate that he'd not heard. "You'd not leave us," Barshie repeated in the sudden stillness. Joseph looked at his watch. It was 11 o'clock. The silence went on. There was no answering fire. All along the line was silent. Everywhere. Slowly men stood up, tentatively at first, then more and more. And there were tens of thousands of them, as far as the eye could see, in every direction. Someone cheered, and another, until there was a roar that filled the air and echoed across Europe from the mountains to the sea. Write a good ending. Say what you mean to say. Put your heart on the page.